I didn't cry when my son banned me from his wedding. I thought I would. I thought I'd crumble the way mothers do in movies, clutching their chest, gasping. How could you? But instead I stood there motionless, the air in my kitchen sharp with the scent of burnt toast and betrayal. Daniel's voice trembled, though he tried to steady it. Mom, it's better this way. For everyone. For everyone? I repeated, my throat dry. Who's everyone, Daniel? You and your bride. He winced at the word. Please don't make this harder than it already is. I didn't answer. The sound of the refrigerator humming filled the silence between us. The same refrigerator that once held his science projects, his birthday cakes, his little victories taped to it with pride. Now, it felt like a monument to someone who didn't exist anymore. I wanted to scream. To demand he look me in the eye and tell me what I had done so wrong. What crime I had committed that justified erasing me from the most important day of his life. But I didn't. Because I already knew. It wasn't my son's decision. It was hers. The first time I met Emily, I told myself she was just nervous. Pretty, polite, a little distant, the kind of woman who smiled without showing her teeth. When Daniel brought her home for dinner, she wore a white blouse so crisp it looked like it might cut her if she moved too fast. She complimented my cooking, laughed in all the right places, and left without touching her dessert. She's just shy, Daniel had said afterward, wrapping an arm around me like he used to when he was a boy. Don't overthink it, Mom. Overthink it. As if that wasn't what I'd done my whole life for him. But I couldn't shake it. The way she'd looked at me like I was something she needed to endure. Not a mother-in-law to win over, but an obstacle. A few weeks later the calls started fading. Daniel's visits grew shorter. And one evening, after I left him 3 voicemails asking if we could plan the rehearsal dinner together, he finally texted back. Emily thinks it'd be less stressful if we handled things ourselves. You understand, right? Less stressful. I had to reread it 3 times before it sank in. I busied myself in the days after, baking, cleaning, pretending the house still needed to be perfect for guests who no longer came. But nothing silenced the thought echoing in my head. She's taking him away from me. Not long after, I found my proof. It was a Sunday morning. I'd gone to drop off an old photo album I'd promised to lend Daniel, the one with his childhood trips and his father's last birthday before he passed. I didn't tell him I was coming. I wanted it to be a surprise. When I got to their apartment, I froze at the door. Through the half-open curtain, I could see them in the living room. Emily sitting cross-legged on the couch, Daniel leaning over her shoulder. They weren't laughing or affectionate. They were reading something on a laptop. And then she pointed at the screen, her expression twisted into disgust. I heard her say, "This is her, Daniel. This is exactly why I don't want her at the wedding." My heart dropped. Daniel rubbed his forehead. "It's not what you think. That was years ago, Em. She was under pressure. She's manipulative," Emily snapped. "And if you can't see that, then maybe you're more like her than I thought." I didn't hear the rest because I stepped back. Slowly, quietly, like a criminal retreating from a scene I wasn't meant to witness. My palms were sweating, my chest tightening with a kind of pain I hadn't felt since my husband's funeral. Whatever she had found, whatever she thought she knew about me, it was destroying the one relationship that still mattered. That night, I sat in bed staring at my husband's old watch on the nightstand. He'd died 7 years ago. A heart attack that came too soon, too sudden. He'd been a man of principle, quiet but strong, the kind of father Daniel adored. And before he died, he'd made me promise to keep the family together, no matter what. But now it felt like I was failing him too. I needed to know what Emily had seen, what she was using to turn my son against me. So I did what I'd sworn never to do again. I opened the locked drawer in my study, the one that held the truth I'd buried long ago. Inside was a folder. Old documents, some yellowed with time, others printed from emails I should have deleted. Evidence of something that, once upon a time, had nearly destroyed my marriage. My husband had forgiven me, but apparently Emily had not. It started 22 years ago. A brief affair, one night of weakness, after months of feeling unseen, unheard, unloved. My husband was drowning in work. I was raising a 5-year-old alone most nights. And I let loneliness convince me I deserved comfort. It was over before it began. I confessed to my husband and he, in his grace and heartbreak, forgave me. We rebuilt slowly, painfully, but we did it. We even renewed our vows years later. Only 3 people had ever known the truth. Me, my husband, and the man I'd betrayed him with. But now somehow Emily knew too. And if she knew, it meant someone had told her. Someone who wanted to destroy me. I couldn't sleep that night. The rain tapped against the windows, soft and steady, and I lay there wondering, was it Daniel's father's old business partner? The man who'd once hinted at knowing my little secret? Or was it someone from the past I thought I'd erased? Either way, the truth had resurfaced, and Emily had weaponized it. By morning, I decided to confront her. I drove to their apartment again, heart pounding, telling myself I'd be calm, civil, composed. But when she opened the door, she didn't even look surprised to see me. "Mrs. Carter," she said, arms crossed. "You shouldn't be here." "Apparently, I shouldn't be anywhere near your wedding either," I said quietly. Her lips curved into a cold smile. "Daniel told you?" I stepped closer. "You found something. About me. And you used it to turn my son against me. Why?" Emily didn't flinch. "Because he deserves to know the kind of person you are." "What kind of person am I, Emily?" I asked, my voice shaking now. Her eyes narrowed. "The kind who cheats. The kind who lies. The kind who hides behind being a victim, when you're the reason your husband almost left." The words sliced through me, sharp and precise. "Who told you?" She tilted her head. "Let's just say the truth has a way of finding its way home." And then, before I could speak again, Daniel appeared behind her. Eyes dark, jaw tight. "Mom," he said, voice low. "I think you should go." I looked at him. My son, my only child, the boy who once brought me dandelions from the yard, and saw a stranger. I left without another word. But as I drove away, one thought burned in my mind, fierce and clear. If Emily thought she could bury me with my past, she hadn't learned who taught Daniel how to fight for family. And I was going to remind her. The next morning, I woke up with that familiar taste of dread on my tongue, bitter and metallic, like guilt left to rot. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked older than I remembered. My hair, my eyes, they all seemed dulled by years I hadn't felt until now. I'd spent the night replaying every word Emily said, dissecting every syllable. The kind who cheats. The kind who hides. Those words weren't hers. They were too pointed, too rehearsed. She'd learned them from someone. Someone who wanted to make sure they pierced deep. But who? After my husband's death, I'd lived quietly. My world was small, work, home, the occasional dinner with Daniel. The affair was buried decades ago. So how did it crawl out of its grave now? I made coffee I didn't drink and sat at the kitchen table with the folder of old papers again. The ink had faded, but the shame hadn't. The man's name, Richard Bennett, stared up at me from an old letter he'd sent me after we ended things. He'd written, "You'll regret letting this go, Mary. Secrets don't stay secrets forever." He'd been bitter when I cut him off. Years later, after my husband's death, he'd shown up at the funeral, offered condolences, a long, unnecessary hug, and eyes that lingered too long. I'd avoided him ever since. Could he have reached out to Emily somehow? Could that be it? No. He wouldn't know her. By noon, I was in my car, the folder sealed in a plastic envelope beside me. I told myself I wasn't being paranoid, that if I wanted the truth, I had to chase it. Richard still lived in town, managing what was left of his real estate business. His office was sterile, too white, too cold. When he saw me standing at his door, he smiled like time had done him favors. "Mary," he said, voice smooth with old familiarity. "Now this is a surprise." "I bet it is," I said flatly, stepping inside. "Did you talk to my son's fiancée?" He blinked just a fraction too slow. Then he laughed. A short, humorless sound. "You really think I'd have reason to?" "I think you'd have every reason," I said. "You threatened me once, remember? Said secrets don't stay buried." He smirked, leaning back in his chair. "And yet here you are. Still standing." "I'd say that means I was wrong." Something in his tone made my stomach twist. I studied him, the smug calm, the deliberate detachment. He was lying. "You sent her something," I said softly. "Emails. Photos. Something from that year." He looked amused. "If I had, don't you think she would have mentioned my name?" That stopped me cold. He knew. He knew what she'd said to me, word for word. I leaned forward. So you did talk to her? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. The air outside felt too thin, like the world had turned smaller. As I drove, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. If Richard had reached Emily, he hadn't done it alone. He didn't move in Daniel's world. He barely left his own. Someone had connected them. Someone close. That night I called my sister Ellen. Ellen had always been my anchor. Opinionated, sharp-tongued, the kind of woman who could cut glass with her glare but still somehow made you laugh afterward. She'd helped me through my husband's death, through Daniel's teenage rebellion, through everything. When she answered, her voice was wary. Mary? What's wrong? Do you remember Richard Bennett? I asked. A pause. Yes, why? I think he's the reason Emily knows about my past. Another pause. Longer this time. Oh, Mary. What? I asked, instantly suspicious. Ellen sighed. Before you say anything, I didn't mean for it to go this far. The room tilted. What did you do? I didn't tell her directly, she said quickly. She came to me asking questions about you, about how you and your husband met, your early years. I thought she was just trying to learn more about the family. And you told her about Richard? I whispered. She already knew some, Ellen said defensively. She said she'd heard something from one of Daniel's coworkers, some rumor that you'd been unfaithful once. I filled in the blanks. I closed my eyes, the world spinning. You told her my husband forgave me, that we rebuilt. Yes, Ellen said. But she didn't care about that part, did she? I gripped the edge of the table. You had no right. Her voice softened. Mary, she asked me not to tell you. She said she wanted to protect Daniel, to make sure he wasn't walking into a marriage built on lies. I thought. You thought wrong, I snapped. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said quietly, you helped destroy me, Ellen. And I hung up. That night, I sat in the dark living room, the old clock ticking too loudly on the wall. My son's wedding was in 5 days. 5 days, and I was the ghost everyone pretended not to see. I kept thinking about Emily's words. He deserves to know the kind of person you are. If she wanted him to know who I was, then maybe it was time she saw who she was too. The next morning I made a plan. I still had friends, people who'd known me and my husband, people who'd heard things but also knew truth from rumor. I called one of them, Margaret, who worked as an event planner for the same hotel hosting the wedding. She hesitated at first. Mary, I don't want to get in the middle of family business. I'm not asking you to, I said gently. I just need to know if there's a way I can talk to my son, privately, before the ceremony. That's all. There was a long silence. Then she said quietly, come by on Friday morning. I'll find a way to get you 10 minutes. When Friday came, I wore the same navy dress I'd planned to wear to the wedding before I was uninvited. I told myself I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry. I just wanted Daniel to hear my side once. Margaret met me in the hotel's back corridor and led me through a staff entrance. I could hear laughter echoing from one of the ballrooms, distant, joyous, the sound of celebration I no longer belonged to. When Daniel finally appeared, his tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled, I barely recognized him. He looked tired, older, as if guilt had already started to wear him down. Mom, he said quietly, you shouldn't be here. I smiled sadly. I know, but you should have known I'd come anyway. He sighed. I don't want to do this right now. Then when? I asked softly. After you marry a woman who thinks your mother is a disgrace? His eyes flicked away. She's just trying to protect me. From what? I demanded. From a mistake I made before you were even in grade school? From a sin your father already forgave? Daniel's jaw tightened. You lied to him. I told him the truth. I said louder than I intended. And he loved me anyway. That's what love is, Daniel. Not perfection, forgiveness. He looked torn. The silence stretched between us like a wound. Then I said something I hadn't planned to. Emily's not protecting you. She's controlling you. He flinched. That's not true. Then why am I standing here like a stranger outside your own wedding? He didn't answer. I took a deep breath. Daniel, I know who told her about my past. But I also know who helped make sure she used it against me. And I can prove it. He frowned. What do you mean? I met his eyes. Let's just say your fiancé and I aren't the only ones keeping secrets. His expression changed, confusion then unease. What are you talking about, Mom? Come tonight, I said softly. After the rehearsal dinner. I'll tell you everything. Then I turned and walked away before he could stop me. I didn't expect Daniel to show up that night. After all, I'd been erased from his life with surgical precision, cut out of his future like a stain on a white dress. But when I heard the soft knock at my front door around 10:30 p.m., my heart stumbled. I opened the door to find him standing there in a wrinkled shirt, his tie gone, his expression a mix of exhaustion and defiance. He looked less like a groom and more like a boy caught between right and wrong, between his mother and the woman who'd made him choose. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped aside silently. He didn't sit. He paced. I shouldn't be here, he muttered. If Emily finds out. If Emily finds out, I interrupted. Then maybe she'll finally know what it feels like to lose control. He looked at me sharply. You're angry. I'm hurt, Daniel, I said quietly. There's a difference. He stopped pacing, jaw tight. You said you had proof of something. I'm here to listen, but please don't turn this into a fight. I studied his face. The boy who once believed I could fix everything was gone. In his place stood a man who didn't know whether to defend me or the woman tearing me apart. Sit, I said softly. This isn't a fight. It's the truth. I handed him the plastic envelope, the same one I'd carried to Richard's office. Inside were copies of old emails and a recent printout I'd found by accident 2 days ago. It had come from an anonymous account, but the writing style, the phrasing, even the choice of words screamed familiarity. Daniel frowned as he skimmed the pages. What am I looking at? Emails, I said. Between Emily and a man named Richard Bennett. His eyes shot up. Who is he? Someone from my past. Someone who wanted to ruin me once. And apparently still does. Daniel looked down again, reading. His frown deepened. This can't be real. It's real, I said. Every word. The emails were short but loaded with venom. You were right, she lied for years. He deserves to know the kind of woman his mother really is. I'll send what I have if you promise she never steps foot in that wedding. Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he turned the page. Consider it done, Emily had replied. He'll believe me over her. He looked up slowly, his expression fractured. Disbelief fighting with anger. Love warring with shame. Why would she? Because control isn't love, I said softly. It's fear disguised as protection. And Emily's terrified of anything she can't own. Daniel slumped into the chair, rubbing his temples. Mom, if this is true, I don't know what to think. It is true. But that's not even the worst of it. He glanced up, wary. There's more, I said. Something I discovered this morning. That morning, I'd gone through the old box of my husband's letters, ones I'd kept sealed for years. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for context. For something that could tell me why Emily and Richard ever crossed paths. And then I found it. A faded envelope with my husband's handwriting, addressed to Mr. Richard Bennett. Inside was a single page written shortly after my confession decades ago. I forgive her, but I will not forget what you did. If you ever come near my family again, I'll expose you for the fraud you are. My heart had stopped when I read that last line. Fraud. I hadn't known then, but apparently Richard had been stealing from their company, small amounts over years. My husband had covered for him quietly, for my sake, to keep the scandal from tainting me further. And now, years later, Richard was trying to destroy what was left of my husband's name by coming after me through my son. But the question still remained. How had Emily found him? That answer arrived an hour after Daniel left my house that night. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You really think you've won? Ask Daniel's father's partner who paid your bills the last year before he died. I froze. My husband had been sick before he passed, quietly accumulating hospital debt I hadn't fully understood. We'd never discussed where all the money came from. I called the number. No answer. Just voicemail. So I called the one person who might know, my husband's former law partner, William. He hesitated when I asked. Mary, you don't want to dig that up. I already have, I said flatly. Did Richard Bennett give us money? A long silence. Then, he did. He said it was a business loan to help with the firm's liquidity, but I always suspected he had ulterior motives. My stomach turned. Ulterior motives like what? Like owning your husband's silence, William said quietly. And now maybe yours. I felt cold all over. The pieces clicked. Richard had lent my husband money near the end, and somehow Emily had learned about it. She'd used it to spin her narrative, to paint me as a woman who'd corrupted everything she touched. Family, love, business. And Daniel had believed it because no one had told him otherwise. When I finished explaining all this to Daniel, he sat there in stunned silence. Finally, he whispered, "She said you tried to pay her off." "What?" I stared at him. "She said you offered her money not to tell me about your past, that you were trying to buy her silence." I laughed. A hollow bitter sound. "Of course she did." "Mom," he said quietly, eyes wide. "Did you?" "Daniel." I reached across the table, taking his hand. "I may have made terrible mistakes in my life, but lying to you now isn't one of them. I never offered her a cent. She lied because she wanted to isolate you, to make sure I had no voice in your life." He swallowed hard. "I don't know who to believe anymore." "Then believe what you see," I said, nodding toward the emails. "That's her in her own words. You don't need me to convince you." He stared at them again, breathing heavily. "If this is true, I can't go through with the wedding." I wanted to tell him not to rush, to think, but a part of me also wanted him to feel the fire of betrayal, to see for once how it burned. Instead, I said softly, "Do what you need to do, Daniel. Just remember who you are before she rewrites it for you." He stood slowly, folding the papers. "I need time." Then he left, leaving the door half open behind him, just as he had weeks ago when he told me I wasn't welcome at his wedding. But this time I didn't feel left out. This time I felt the storm shifting in my favor. The next day I got a call from Margaret. "Mary," she said, her voice low and urgent, "you should come to the hotel tomorrow. Daniel asked to move the wedding time. I think something's happening." My pulse raced. Did he say why? No. But I heard Emily crying in the dressing room earlier. And there's talk that her parents have been asked to meet with the officiant privately. I closed my eyes, a strange calm settling over me. "Thank you, Margaret," I said. "I'll be there." That night I didn't sleep. For the first time in weeks I wasn't afraid. I was ready. Ready to walk into that wedding, not as the uninvited mother, not as the disgraced woman, but as the bearer of truth no one else dared to speak. The kind of truth that silences rooms. And when the morning came, I dressed in quiet defiance. Silver earrings, dark blue silk, and my husband's watch on my wrist. I looked in the mirror and whispered, "Let's finish this." The hotel glimmered under the late morning sun. Polished glass, white roses at the entrance, guests dressed in soft pastels. It was the kind of day you were supposed to remember for joy. But for me it felt like walking into a courtroom. I parked far from the valet and entered through the back, where Margaret waited near the catering hall. Her eyes darted nervously as she whispered, "They're starting the pre-ceremony photos. Daniel's in the suite with his best man. Emily's in the bridal room. Has anyone seen me yet?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not yet. But Mary, are you sure you want to do this here?" "Yes," I said. "Here is the only place she can't lie her way out of it." Margaret hesitated, then handed me a folded napkin. "Then you should know something. Daniel's been asking questions all morning about Richard Bennett, about the money. He's not himself." A sharp, anxious ache stirred in my chest. "Thank you." Then I walked down the hall toward the bridal suite, my heels clicking like a metronome counting down to something irreversible. The door was slightly ajar. Inside I could hear the soft hum of voices, the rustle of silk. Emily's reflection glowed in the vanity mirror. Hair pinned perfectly, veil draped like a halo. But there was no warmth in her eyes. Only calculation. When she spotted me in the mirror, she froze. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, spinning around. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. "I came to give you a wedding gift." "I don't want anything from you." "Oh, I think you do," I said. "You've wanted my silence since the day you met me. You thought if you could erase me from Daniel's life, you could control him completely." Her expression didn't change, but her knuckles whitened around the edge of the vanity. You're out of your mind. Then why were you emailing Richard Bennett? I asked, voice calm, deliberate. Why did you promise him my son's trust in exchange for my humiliation? Her lips parted slightly, shock flickering before she masked it. You're bluffing. Am I? I reached into my clutch and placed the printed emails on the table between us. You shouldn't have used your company account, Emily. For someone who prides herself on being smarter than everyone, you made it too easy. Her face went pale. This isn't going away, I said. Daniel knows. And if you think you can spin it, go ahead. Try. But the truth is out now, and I'll say it in front of every guest if I have to. She laughed then, a brittle, desperate sound. You think this will stop the wedding? You think he'll pick you over me? I met her gaze evenly. No. I think he'll pick the truth over a lie. Before she could respond, the door opened. Daniel stood there. His tie was gone, his eyes bloodshot. He looked at Emily first, then at me. Mom, he said quietly, I told you to wait. I couldn't, I said. You deserve to hear both sides before you make the biggest decision of your life. Emily stepped toward him, voice trembling but rehearsed. She's lying, Daniel. She's trying to ruin our wedding because she can't stand losing control over you. Daniel held up a hand. Stop. The silence that followed was suffocating. He turned to me. I read everything last night. The emails. The letter from Dad to Richard. Emily's eyes widened. What letter? He ignored her. I called William this morning. He confirmed everything. Dad covered for Richard. He protected our family, and Richard repaid him by blackmailing you. Emily's face drained of color. He's manipulating you. Daniel cut her off, voice sharp now. No. You manipulated me. The room trembled with the words. I believed you, he continued, his voice breaking. I believed you when you said my mother was a liar. That she'd ruined my father's life. That she was toxic. I let you convince me to cut her out because you said it was what love looked like. But love doesn't isolate, Emily. It doesn't destroy everything that came before it. Tears welled in his eyes. You told me she tried to pay you off. You told me she threatened you. None of it was true. Emily's voice cracked. Daniel, I did it for us. He stepped back. No, you did it for control. She reached for him, but he moved away. For the first time she looked small, her confidence stripped bare. I stayed quiet through it all, watching, heart pounding, every muscle in my body vibrating with a mix of grief and vindication. Then Daniel turned to me. Mom, I'm so sorry. I shook my head, my throat tightening. You don't have to apologize, Daniel. You just have to see clearly now. I do, he said softly. I see everything. He turned to Emily one last time. This wedding's over. Her lips trembled. If you walk out that door, I'll tell everyone what she did, what kind of woman she is. He looked at her, his voice steady but cold. You can tell them anything you want. But after today, no one will believe a word that comes from your mouth. And with that he walked out. The ceremony never happened. The guests waited for almost an hour before word spread that the wedding had been postponed. I sat in the back corner of the lobby, watching as people whispered, puzzled, curious. When Daniel finally found me, he looked exhausted but lighter, as if a weight had finally lifted. She's gone, he said quietly. Her parents took her home. I nodded. And you? He sat beside me, silent for a long moment. I don't even know who I am without all of this noise. You're my son, I said gently. And that's enough. He smiled faintly, tears in his eyes. You always said truth has a way of surfacing. I reached for his hand. It does. The question is whether we're ready to face it when it does. He squeezed my hand back. Thank you for fighting for me. I looked at him, really looked, and realized I wasn't fighting for him anymore. I was fighting with him. Later that evening, after everyone had gone, I stood alone outside the hotel's garden. The air smelled of wilted roses and rain. The chaos had passed, but my heart still raced with echoes of it. I thought about my husband, the man who'd forgiven me once, who'd believed redemption was worth fighting for. I hoped wherever he was, he knew I'd finally kept my promise. I'd protected our family. Then as I turned to leave, I noticed Daniel walking toward me with something in his hands. It was a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges. I found this in Dad's old box, he said softly. You should have it. I unfolded it. It was a note, written in my husband's familiar handwriting. If the truth ever tries to destroy you again, let it. Because only what's real can survive the storm. I smiled through my tears. He always knew what to say. Daniel nodded. And so do you. The next morning I woke to silence. Not the heavy kind that crushes, but the kind that heals. My son was free. The lies were gone. And for the first time in years I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of my past. I felt like I'd finally set it down. The world hadn't fallen apart. It had simply begun again.